This is the Hip Hop African Podcast, a show where we have in-depth conversations about African hip hop culture and artists. Your host is Msia Kibona Clark, a professor in the Department of African Studies at Howard University. For more information or to contact us, please visit us at hiphopafrican.com.
Up has never been me, been part of my essence. Told myself when I was done mapping it out, I'll be the legend. That's why I stand aside when you try to compare the rest of them. What I've been through, they can't stomach or start digesting. Wanna know what gave me motivation or possessed them? To be or not to be, what I'm meant to be was the question. And through it all, I learned a valuable lesson. I can do it all. Whether it's stress or pending regression, I've been through it all. I ain't afraid to be underrated. I savor it, love it, challenge. I made it.
Welcome back to the Hip Hop African Podcast. Today we have a hip hop pioneer, legend. I think almost every artist I've talked to since 2009, when I started really kind of interviewing artists, whether they're in East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa. MI has been on their list of MCs who've influenced them, who they're a fan of. Just really kind of listing artists, MCs, especially around the continent. So he's, definitely a legend in terms of hip hop culture. He was born originally in Jos in northern Nigeria and released his debut album in 2008. We'll talk about it. He was the CEO of the label Chocolate City from 2015 to 2019, and then started his own label in 2020, Incredible Music. Prior to getting into the music industry, however, he studied in the U.S. for a while in Michigan, then came back to Nigeria and really got his music career launched in 2003. He has received several music awards throughout his career, including the MTV Africa Music Awards and BET Awards. He is also involved in different initiatives to bring about social and political change in Nigeria. He was declared the UN Office of Drugs and Crime Goodwill Ambassador against smuggling of migrants in 2012. In this role, he was charged with speaking out on and drawing attention to the smuggling issue. In Nigeria's most recent election, his organization, TASCK Creatives Agency, launched a campaign aimed at encouraging young people to vote. So I'm sure there's a lot more that I kind of skipped over. You've been in this 20 years. So 2003, 20 years, 20-year career. So thank you. Welcome to the show.
Wow, 20 years. Well, I like to think most artists try to bookmark with their first project. So in my mind, I think 15 years, because Talk About It came out in 2008. But you're right. You're absolutely right. And thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I think this is important work, important conversations, and meeting dope new people is also really good. So.
Well, and I was, definitely when I ask artists, because I usually will ask folks, who are some of the artists that they've listened to. And it's, there are few, because most people will say like the obligatory MCs from the US, you got the Nas's and the Jay-Z's and Mos Def and, but when you're looking at who artists in other countries in Africa are looking at in Africa, there's very few artists that are on multiple lists. People will name people from their country or maybe in their region. So in Tanzania and Uganda, Kenya, in South Africa, you showed up on several people's lists. And then even in the diaspora, talking to a couple artists from Zimbabwe here and from other countries who are here, Senegal, you showed up on their list as well as artists that they've listened to. So that's very few MCs can say that. So congrats on your career.
Thank you.
And so, there's a lot. So after having such a long career, you, of course, put out several projects. And one of the things as I was going back through and kind of trying to listen from the earlier projects till now, of course, artists mature and your ideas change. And I was actually talking about this, the idea of kind of older artists and kind of how artists kind of mature in their career. So you look at like a Jay-Z now versus Jay-Z back when he first Reasonable Doubt Jay-Z, and how especially male artists, and I was very kind of frustrated to admit this, that they tend to mature better as artists than women, that there aren't as many women who are continuously putting out music, and you see that progression. So a lot of women did their thing and they may step away and do something different in the industry. And they brought up the recent, I think it was Nicki Minaj and Ice Spice video or something, where it was like, okay, an older artist trying to still be like a 20-year-old, but you're not, so it's a lot, but it's with the men, you see that progression. And so I guess I wanted to get from you your own perspective on how you've seen your career growth and trajectory over the years.
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, let me acknowledge the compliment earlier in what you said. It really, truly is such a gift to have been a young kid from Jos who made music and now is part of this story that's larger than myself. I was talking to an investor friend of mine recently, and he said something like, he said, very few people will ever get the chance to truly live their dreams. And at least for one of mine, I'm one of those lucky people, that, and then the second thing is the thing you said about women is so interesting. I've never thought about it, but it just makes sense because society doesn't allow women to be like the restrictions on who you can be publicly as a woman are just so much more complicated and different. And that actually makes sense. It's like, there's this, like at a certain age, you should probably be home with your kids. And so it's like, if you're out doing it, people, and I'd never thought about it, but it's something to think about, especially because as Africa emerges musically, as our industries blossom, we can correct many of the errors that plague the West. It's exciting to see like connection in the global South, but it could also be really powerful for the global South to say, we are going to be an industry that creates safe pipelines for young girls to participate early on, and see and reap the economic benefits. Because we know as human beings what happens when you create a level playing field. We know that everybody benefits. How I see my career, my next phase of music is around being like a superhero. And that's sort of how I see myself. I don't say so with any like arrogance or any pride. I say so because I think if most people reflect on what they've been through in their lives and what it took them to get there, they would be like, man, like what? I did that. I went through that. And when I look back on my life, I'm like, I had no chance to be where I am, no chance to do the things that I've done. And I don't say that and wear it as like a superhero suit to take a picture. But it's when your superhero shows up in your suit, it's like, it's time to get to work because there's more I can do. There's more to give. There's more music to make, especially, and maybe this is a place I'll end, this idea you touched on about being an older artist, right? Like if you think, if we really like deconstruct that phrase, if you are, it's like in other professions, you don't really say like older engineer and think about it the same way, or like older politician. You sort of like attach like gravitas as opposed to the arts where it's sort of like, it's like a knockdown. However, especially in hip hop, especially in Black music, and especially knowing the impact of culture and how much it can shape a generation, should our wiser, older, more seasoned artists no longer speak? When I was young, I had a way I saw relationships with women. When I was younger, I had a way I saw the place of a woman in society, the place of, and hopefully as society changes, your expression evolves. And that's why when I listen to artists like Nas and those people at this age, when I see them still making art, it's so important because now they can tell us about where they are today. They can talk about the cap table. They can talk about investing. They can talk about buying art and buying real estate. Things that when they were 20 years old, it wasn't at the top of their mind. You know, they were trying to get out of the situation they were in. They were trying to find community. They were trying to assert themselves. And, and I really want to be part of the generation as the world continues to discover African music. I want to be able to look at the trophies on the wall and appreciate them, but be able to take a step back, close the door, lock the key, open a brand new cabinet, that's empty, and get to work. And I think maybe that's where I can, I hope I touched, because you opened with such a beautiful comment that touched so many things. I hope I touched. Yeah.
You did. I mean, just so I think there's definitely been several areas of kind of change over the years. I think in listening to a lot of your music, I mean, more of the recent stuff, you're talking about things like toxic masculinity, you're talking about stigmas around depression, in terms of how men are supposed to behave and societal pressures. And you talk about, in one line, every man should be a feminist, and just kind of, you talk about violence against women. And I think it's, interesting in terms of looking at the pressures of society, because you also, and that was in Soldier on the most recent project. But then you also have the track The Lion on the Judah EP, also kind of talking about struggle and kind of overcoming, and are these really inspirational songs. And I think that it's great for people to hear that. And I think that we're seeing more, especially male artists, more comfortable with talking about these topics. And I feel that before, it was always there. We always had these pressures that were, men always kind of had these things, societal pressures, but it seemed to just be vocalized more as aggression than introspection. So you'll have you step on my foot, I'm gonna, punch you in the face. It was just, there was pent up frustration, and it was all because of society and all these other things, but it came out as kind of like aggression and more kind of outward, where now it seems like more artists are looking inward and looking at, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
So have you noticed that shift?
Yeah, of course. I have lived for what technically they say is like half a life. And they say life begins at 40, right? I just crossed that. And now I understand the purpose and the power of change, and how, like, when I hear a new idea, and I can think about this, and I'll use two contrasting examples. Like, I had a guy who early on was trying to get me to buy Bitcoin. Early on, he was a fan of mine. He sent me a message, "Am I please? I promise you." And I ignored him early on. This is when it was nothing. I ignored him early on, right? And you see how that change happens over time, right? And I use that as an example to show you how you hope that culture changes over time. You hope that people have new ideas and new experiences, and that you can lean into understanding, especially as a man born in Nigeria, in a Christian home. It's first boy, it's position of privilege. And you now get to see the world as you listen to other people and see the world in a different way. And I think that creating pipelines for artists that are more mature, more introspective, as that shift has happened, because even in the introspective sense, like I would say, like a rapper like DMX was really introspective, but it still had that energy that you spoke about, where it's like introspection through force, right? But there is introspection through experience, and introspection through loss, introspection. They're all different types of, like, you can tap into different energies and introspect through them. And I think that you become better after you've had lived experience. You become better at understanding a situation. You become better at understanding yourself. You don't know yourself at 21. You know your experiences, you know your community, but it's going to take you a little bit longer to be able to sit and be like, I actually have seen myself in situation after situation and after situation. And now I know the things I like, or the things or you don't know yourself as well as you will at 30, as you will at 21. You, of course, know who you are. But so to me, it's become like almost a sense of like responsibility as I look forward to be part of creating a wider conversation. So I intentionally talk about things like feminism, because it's so easy for that conversation not to be had in the spaces where I create. But if I want to see change happen, because I've seen the impact of change, then you have to lace up, and show up. And I definitely do want to be part of that. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think that how, especially in this generation, people have spoken about depression, anxiety, how people have been able to put language to feelings that they had that they didn't have before. I hope that we have a generation next that starts to talk about things like resentment and shame and put that in music. There's some hidden, more darker emotions that we've not yet really because ultimately our music can be a vehicle through which people can find healing, can touch healing, maybe not find it, but touch it, or can hear about healing, can hear that someone has been through this and can be healed. I think that that's what was missing from the earlier. It's not that we heard the pain, but we didn't hear the healing. And I think that that's the growth. That's the part that we can evolve forward into as a culture.
Okay, I hadn't thought about it like that. We heard the pain, but we didn't hear the healing. But yeah, no, that's Miranda.
Yeah, I'm just listening, taking it all in. No, I appreciate this conversation because, when I listened to the last album, The Guy, these are the things that I'm hearing, definitely personal growth, definitely that introspection. But it's also like a, really good vibe, because through that, you can enjoy the music, through anything, right? Like if I just want to vibe out, if I'm chilling with my friends, if I want to work out, be confident. So I definitely feel all of that through the music. So thank you. Speaking of that, the last album, because it came out in 2022, right?
Yeah. Last year.
But since you've been in the game so long, I'm curious, because that's kind of how I first, encountered your work, was through that album. I'm curious, for you, which albums, are more if you want someone to be introduced to your music, how would you walk them through that? Because also kind of learning more about you, what's out there on the internet, people are saying that your 2008 album, your first debut, was this big kind of change for Nigeria.
They were tweeting about it yesterday as well. Yeah, they were talking about how someone tweeted and said, "There's never been a better Nigerian rap album than my first album." And I retweeted. I have two other albums that I was like, "No, I disagree. I have two other albums that are better than that." And then people started. The Guy. It's a great place for us to start. I struggle with the name, in the Men Are Scum era, to name something The Guy. But the reason I did it was I identify as a male and a man and in this society. And I don't know if we're actually, as men, talking to each other and being open about the help we need, about the questions we have to ask, about how a healthy way to balance your ego and your learning, about how to talk about love. There's a way I used to talk about love a little differently. I mean, I think some themes about MI are the same, and I'll come to the second part of your question. But and so that album for me was a reflection on myself in the moment, in a point where I was finally starting to be proud of myself, and coincidentally inspired by a female Nigerian musician. Tiwa Savage got signed at 41. And I was like, to Lucien Grange. It doesn't happen. It's like a fairy tale. It literally is like hearing the story. Like there's this Nigerian singer who was on Idols and then came through this, had all this conflict, and then got a record deal later in her life. And I was like, if she could do it, I can do it. I was a little bigger at the time. So I started running, started figuring out. I always see those magazines where it's like, because for me, part of the challenge was I would struggle like in videos and stuff, So I was like, I need to get back to a certain a size where I feel comfortable. And this was the most challenging thing I'd done in my life. And when I had done it, it wasn't really about the goal. It was about the fact that I'd said something to myself and I'd kept my word to myself. And I was like, oh, I'm the guy that does that. I'm now the guy. Like I promised myself I was going to do this thing, and I did it. And I saw I was getting married at the time. I was seeing all this growth. I was seeing like, hey, for one of the first times in my life, I've gone through significant change, significant upheaval. And that's what that album is about. It's about everything. It's about being braggadocious, about love, about learning, about reflection. And that's the way to look at MI's catalog. But if I were to sell MI to you, I'm going to pitch MI to you, Miranda, so that you know how to listen to my catalog. If you're just discovering African music, there are some key pillars that have shaped music. And some of them are right there for you to see, like Wizkid. He's right there. You meet African music today, Wizkid is amazing, right? David as well, David O. And then you'll discover like P Square, Two-Face, Weird MC, older. But there's this artist, seminal artist in the genre of hip hop. And he put out 3 commercial albums and 3 mixtapes within a span of 6 years. And they completely shifted the landscape of music, completely. And if you're going to go into that, it's good to listen to those 3. You can listen to the 3 mixtapes as a body of work because they sound alike. They're different. They would sound way more like traditional hip hop. It's more bars. It was around the time that like Drake and all these guys were coming out. So that's the Illegal Music series. And also we couldn't clear the samples. So I just put it out for free. I just bootlegged it to the world. Illegal Music 1, 2, 3. Then there are the commercial albums. Talk About It, MI2 and The Chairman. And then MI then left his role at Chocolate City. MI became a CEO and then now started becoming really introspective. So there are 3 projects. The Study on Self, which is probably where I would want you to start. It's called Young Denzel. Judah, the EP, which was a really low moment and me trying to talk about it. And then a project called The Live Report, which was recorded in 3 days remotely during COVID. We were talking about coming to terms with like religion and all the stuff that was happening. There was just so much. And then there's another project. Look how I'm just going and going. There's another project called Rendezvous, which has all the kids that are stars today. In 2016, I had said, Odunsi, Teiwar, CK, Black Bones, like I got a bunch of them and we made a playlist. It was just a song. It flows from song to 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 song. So you're talking to an artist that has a very rich catalog that is interwoven, that has a lot of like nuggets, inside them. And the fan base are really very like fervent over like the music. They like argue over projects, and stuff like that. And definitely an artist that I would say that has tried to be honest about their experience of the world, especially because they realize their privilege, they realize their position, they realize their challenges. And I think that it's a very valuable perspective for the world in music. I'm a huge MI fan, and I'm like, I definitely suggest that you listen to everything,
All right, I will. I would definitely take that advice. And yeah, another album that I did really like was A Study on Self. Like that's a really good one. That was giving me kind of like early Kanye vibes. I really like that. So another thing that I kind of wanted to hear from you about is, because also in kind of, checking you out online, seeing what you're about, it seems like a lot of artists have kind of appreciated you or given thanks because of, you putting them on, essentially, like either featuring them on your albums or really kind of helping them through their careers. So I want to ask you, like, how important is that for you in your work? Because, you've already been successful in doing what you want to do and things. So, how important is it for you to reach back and, put other artists on and kind of guide them through their own careers?
Yeah. It's definitely something I've done my whole career. You're right. Now there's a female music exec, Osage, who should get the prime credit for Wizkid, but I played like a significant role, early on. I signed CK, and between these two like huge like behemoths of Afrobeat culture, I've signed so many artists and contributed to so many other artists. I think the sense of community. I want to say that in almost every place where I've studied Black culture emerging, there's always like a strong community, attached to it. And I think Nigeria was no different, and that the people that were like, if you had that mindset, you were able to really, integrate and be very helpful. It's not easy because therein as well, the potential for damage lies. People take advantage of artists. At the same time as well, when you're in a community setting, you get taken advantage of as well. And I've been part of business endeavors where I did it for love and I lost out, big ways too, in big ways. But ultimately, my purpose, this is the reason you see me at Incredible Music, building incredible music. You see me with TASCK. TASCK is going to help connect creators to creatives to opportunities. And the reason why is because I look back at my life and I think about young Jude. And I'm like, if he had gotten support his whole life, and I want to be part of making the world, of bending the fabric of reality in a way that makes it easier for the next young creative that's going to be born in Jos, or it's going to be born in DC, or it's going to be born in, like, we can do a better job. We look back at history, at all our creatives and what the journey they've been through. We can do a better job of helping them because they do so much for us. They challenge systems that aren't working. They speak out on behalf of people. They help us. They tell us how to feel, and so I am committed to playing my role every day, as long as I live. This is my personal mission, to help as many creatives as I can to have an easier journey than I did.
Right on.
Yeah, I love that. That's the perfect response. Is right on. Yeah. I'm going to integrate right on into. I'm going to use it more.
Please do. Please do.
It hit right.
So speaking of the album Study of Self, that was probably one of my favorites. I think it is a lot of kind of, you have the song, Do You Know Who You Are? A lot of consciousness, a lot of not talking about knowledge of self. And it does remind me early Kanye, just, like Miranda said, it really, really does. I think probably my favorite MI song is You Rapper Should Fix Up Your Life. I love that song. So the Hip Hop in Africa class I teach, the students have to do blog posts. They have to choose a country and do blog posts. Very early on, I try to hammer in the difference between Afrobeats and hip hop. And they always, even though I do that, they still would do these posts on Afrobeats artists. I just, take, because the platform is for hip hop. So I'll play a Davido video and then I'll play that song. I'm like, can you see the difference? I mean, the structure, the lyrics and all that. And for some of them, the kind of light clicks on, but they're so used to saying that Afrobeats is African hip hop that it's sometimes hard for them to disconnect that idea. Sure. But that song, I mean, it's really because it is at a time when South African hip hop, because I'm assuming when you say the South, you're talking about SA, you're talking about South Africa. And South African hip hop is huge.
Was massive.
And
I kept getting, sorry, I just like jumped in to just add a little more context. Sorry, I'm a CEO at the time, working at a company, and every AKA Rest His Soul or Nasty C would go to South Africa and freestyle on Sway. The whole country would be like, "Am I?" Where I'm like, I gotta still be the guy, you know what I mean? Like, still gotta come do this thing. I don't know. I listened to that whole album maybe like 2 months ago with my wife, because it's the 5-year anniversary of Study on Self this year. And I don't know how I got away with putting that record out. I don't know how I got away with it. Like, it is so like, I remember the like, Kogi rappers fix up your life, but listening to the rap again, I was like, yo, I didn't have a bodyguard. I was just moving around. But I think what happened was that it brought the conversation about, because rappers responded immediately. Immediately in Nigeria, they were just like, "What? How dare you?" And they took the beat and responded. And we discovered like so many rappers, a few of whom are like doing really well now in that moment. Black Bones included. People just the responses were fire, and I just kept retweeting and retweeting. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I wanted to add that.
No, that's really helpful, because I was wondering the same thing, because you had a line in there where you talk about rappers are singing now just to get popular. I just been watching like I'm at the opera.
I should have brought my binoculars. You bring the binoculars.
Yeah.
Say rappers are singing now just to get popular. I've just been watching like I'm at the opera. I should have brought my binoculars, because I can't see nobody great. I can't see nobody taking my place. I will admit that Afrobeat, when it started emerging, it took the energy out of the room when it started to really blossom. And what I saw that concerned me wasn't just that Afrobeat artists were doing better, is that our attempts at creating art as rappers was not being watered down, and people weren't trying to be great. And to me, that's what the record is about. And I think like there's a guy now called Odumodu Black. I don't know if you guys are aware of what's happening, but he has a rap record called Declan Rice, right? And it's the number one record, was the number one record in the country. It does not sound like, it's the least pop record you've heard that's like a big record in Nigeria. And that's the point. Like, if you're great, like, fans will discover you. If you attempt to be great, like, there was no path to success when I came out in 2007, 2008. There was there were no rap hip hop playlist or charts, or there was no like African hip hop, and when you want to build something, you have to build, So this was sort of my call to everyone to say, hey, we got to build, I still marvel at the fact they let me get away with that one.
It was amazing. I remember when Manifest came to Howard University. He came in February, and we were talking, and I was, kind of talking about this whole Afrobeats thing. And he was saying, well, a lot of those Afrobeats artists used to rap. And I was like, really? I didn't realize how many used. So then going back and listening to that line, it was like, okay. I did not. So I remember Wizkid is on one of your early tracks, and he's rapping. So,
he was sort of, Wizkid was sort of like, I guess, and also there's a tension because African singers are very rhythmic. Yeah. So from the ears of like someone in the States or someone, right? They could listen to it and it sounds closer to like maybe something the Migos are doing or something Lil Yachty or Uzi's doing. And they'll connect that to hip hop, even though on the continent, it's seen completely differently. It's seen as Afrobeat, completely on another. And, the thing is, I think that's the beauty of the moment we're in. It's like we're learning so much about other perspectives. It like culture is actually really starting to make room where if you sing and you do this in this country, we regard it as that. and it has a history for that reason. But if you do the same thing here, it's looked at as this and it has the same. And if you think about it at a macro level, that's what the world is. It's like in my family, we do this because of our culture, and we should have the same access to life and pursuit of happiness as someone else who does things differently. And the world hasn't been that way. It hasn't been that way for many reasons, some of which we do not have to bring up here before they cut off our internet now during the, the man that's watching, whoever you are. But but at the same time, like hearing you, Msia, talk about like, did I say your name correctly? Mm-hmm. Msia, okay.
Yeah, very few West Africans actually say it properly.
Yeah,
but you did it.
Talk about like listening to the art and then figuring out that, oh, that's the reason this is the process of art. It can allow us to see into someone else's world, and through that gain a greater empathy, learn more about ourselves, learn more about the world, and understand the world, in a better way. And just to say about study of self, we're sort of in the study of self, that album. Honestly, for everyone, if you were to really ask me what album to start with, I would start with the study of self, because I think that there's a lot of that I was talking about on the album that I was figuring out myself personally, that I find is in the global convo of wellness, of self-worth and self-awareness. And that album it's probably my favorite. I don't like to say it when the rest are listening, don't want the other kids to but it's probably my favorite.
Okay. Well, I do definitely admire the fact that, that even though you have kind of Afrobeats here and hip hop here, that artists, especially in yourself and other artists and Nigerian hip hop artists, manage to do collaborations with Afrobeats artists where you yourself aren't necessarily singing, but you're still kind of an MC. I know, being Tanzanian, and in Tanzania, there's this kind of the divide. Either you're an MC there, it's bongo flavor, but I think bongo flavor is actually, everybody's kind of wearing the Afrobeats coat now. Everybody's kind of taking on that label. So you have an artist like Diamond, who's clearly not a hip hop artist. So, but there's a divide where if you're an MC, you can't do a collaboration. If you consider yourself a real MC, whatever that means, you can't do a collaboration with Diamond because of that tension, because of bongo flavor kind of blowing up. And as a result, most of the gigs go to those artists. The deals go to those artists. They get collaborations with international artists, while the MCs don't. And so I do like the fact that, especially as your career progresses and as Afrobeats gets larger and larger, you're doing these collaborations where you're still kind of being yourself. You haven't turned into one of those rappers who become a singer. So I wanted to kind of find out for yourself kind of how that has been. What is your relationship with Afrobeats as a genre and with Afrobeats artists?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question, because you've spoken about like the tension, like hip hop as an art form requires integrity for you to be respected. And I think the genre is always careful. The curators of the genre are always careful that it's the principle of the integrity of intent to be great at this art form that has meant so much, to so many people, and has been so powerful as a tool is preserved. Then this is one side of the tension, right? The other side of the tension is that every art form, even hip hop, in its very foundation, relies on other art forms. It relies on other music. Like you think about the breakbeat, right? Even in its foundation, it's saying we're going to use something from somewhere else. And so this tension is part of the nature of being a practitioner of hip hop. It's happened in the West, it's happened in the States, is happened in. It's been, how real are you? This is the conversation, because we are part of an art form where integrity is the highest value. How pure is your heart towards this art form? It's never going to go away. And at the same time, as an artist, I want to use the tools of the world to create the most art and to try new things. And I think that maybe the answer is that even the greatest artists will be right sometimes and will be wrong sometimes, because we're all human beings, and we're gonna like, nobody's gonna be perfect. We're gonna try. You see, someone as huge as Drake has had to deal with this tension his whole career. Same thing with Jay. Jay spent a lot of time. I'm talking about people in the West that are like, and on the continent is no different. My second album, MI2, I intentionally went after a pop sound because I felt that the bottleneck was that there wasn't enough hip hop on radio, and it didn't allow hip hop to be accepted culturally by the real gatekeepers, parents, principals of schools. Like, those are the real gatekeepers. If you start at that level, if you stop people from accessing the culture, if they think this is like music from like wayward people, and it's just not going to move. So I was like, let's make music. Let's make, what are some of those early records? Let's make My Adidas. So it becomes a phenomenon. And now that creates room for everyone from Mace to DMX, right? Because now it's a genre, it's a thing. And, that has been a huge blessing to me. That album has most of the catalog that I perform when I'm on stage. It's just an amazing, powerful album. But at the same time, when I put it out, the hip hop critics came for me, hey, what's going on? What is going on? Where's your integrity? And I think that that's not a bug, it's a feature. It's a feature of the art form. It's the way it should be. And so in Tanzania, they'll interpret it a different way from South Africa, from Nigeria. And ultimately, I think it's a tension that exists for the benefit of the artist, because every artist has to pick their point and then be true to it and make a case. And I don't think that the goal from an artist perspective should be that people liked my art. It should be first that your priorities should be first, I was true to myself in a way that didn't cause harm to the world, and a way that created some value for me so I could take care of myself. And then if people liked it, great. But if there's a way I could go through those things, the liking it should be the last part. I think what happens where we challenge the integrity is when we say, if people like it, then I will take care of myself. And now let me find a way to do the art form. That is the framework where gatekeepers of hip hop are always going to be on guard. Because once that happens, we're going to disrespect the art form. We're going to disrespect the art form. And it's happened. Those moments have happened. Even as a great hip hop artist, you will have those records where in my mindset, I was more worried about putting out a hit record than I was about speaking honestly on this issue. Within myself. Sorry, my internet, I think, is going in and out. Let me check on it. Can you guys hear me again?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, I was just saying that tension exists. And I think that it's just, as you grow in life, you realize that some things are just the way the world is. It's just, they're going to be two perspectives. For this thing to exist, there have to be two sides, and or at least two sides. And but maybe as a small note to artists that may be listening, or people that are going to be managers, A&Rs, whoever that listens to this, is to say what I found is effective is that you can make that decision when you're compiling a project, but early on allow the artist to try everything to see what feels comfortable. Allow them to try, allow them to make the most pop records they want, allow them to sing as much as they want, allow them to rap as much as they want, so that they can find a position where they are truly comfortable, and then they can use that to grow. A lot of times people join a genre before they're honest about whether they want to be there. And then when they have some success, they're like, oh, howdy, yeah. I hope that covered.
No, I mean, honestly, you think about like artists teaching master classes. I think that artists such as yourself who've had longevity, and one of the threads that ties, a lot of you together, whether, it be an artist like, Manifest or even Sarkodie and, some of the others, is this idea of, yes, you want to succeed, you need to be able to feed your family, but this idea of integrity, this idea of kind of being an artist, putting being an artist before kind of like, I'm going to perform for the check, and however they want me to perform, that's what I'm going to do, because it just seems like those artists, there's not a lot of longevity there. And once the industry feels like, we've changed our mind, now we're doing drill. And if you kind of are going along with what the trend is, you might find yourself, no longer in fashion, and then your career is finished. So I definitely think that that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah. You I think one of the things, just generally, this is maybe a little bit of an off-ramp from the conversation we're having, but one of the things that generally from a human perspective, we struggle with as human beings is what to do when we fail, and how to interpret what a failure means. And as an artist, what this is going to mean is you're going to put out a project. Like the Study on Self, my favorite album. I put it out without like creating the time to properly market and push it. I was focused on other things. And I look back and I wish, this year I want to give it a run. I want to tour it. I want to do, 5-year anniversary and just remaster it and put it out. But in so doing, if as an artist, you're afraid to look and say, I did this and I didn't really, and you're not open to growth that way, it can hamper your personal development, your career development. And so I'm adding that to say that in all these conversations, as an artist or as a manager or someone in the industry working with someone, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to put out the record that everybody's going to be like, what is this? You're going to get it wrong. And the goal is, again, not to attempt to be perfect. The goal is to attempt to create with integrity, trust yourself, know yourself when you get feedback that doesn't agree, and learn and grow, and if I feel like I'm starting my music career. I don't know how to explain it, because now I have it's like the world is starting to listen to Africa. Like I had this first phase where it was like, let's build a thing back home. And I did that. And it was successful and I could have ridden off into the sunset. But now it's like, oh, wait, hey, we have a new market. I'm like, what? More people want to listen to African music? Oh, wait till you guys hear our rap music. We're going to create wait till you guys hear us, wait till you hear the hip hop we create, right? And so how do you get 20 years? How do you do that? You have to accept that you're going to fail. You're not going to do things that are perfect. You're going to make huge mistakes, small mistakes. And that the right way is to be like, maybe there's something for me to learn so that I can go back to doing what I do, creating with integrity through integrity,
That's a great way. No, thank you. That's actually, I think, a really great way to end. I think, looking at, I don't know when Chuck D tweeted it, but I remember a few years ago, he tweeted the fact that Africa is where it's at when it comes to hip hop. Americans don't know, mainly because Americans are always very self-absorbed. And they don't pay attention to what's happening outside and outside the US, and don't realize that there's really more innovation happening outside the US, especially in places like Africa, than what's happening in the US in many ways. I mean, there's a lot that's going on in the US too, but just kind of looking at, okay, now it's, there are a lot of artists that are people that are paying attention and want to hear. And then of course with the UK is just crazy right now. There's just so many artists there doing their thing. And, then you got the drill scene, which I'm still trying to, like, in my head, coming from a different generation, trying to figure out, like, what that's all about. So I guess in just kind of closing, I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of speak on anything that, was kind of on your mind, whether that be upcoming projects or anything that it's been on your mind lately.
Yo, I'm gonna run through a list of things. I'm always excited to talk about things. So number one, for both of the people on the call and for everyone else that's listening, I would like to say that I am trying to solve a big problem in Africa. And that problem is how creatives early on in their career don't have to go through a traumatic experience to make it, which we as the consumer end up receiving through their art as well, and live through as we support them, but that they early on they can support it, they can have the business infrastructure that they need to build businesses in the thing that we know they're disadvantaged at. Instead of taking advantage, build the infrastructure so that they can build businesses for themselves and build sustainable brand around themselves. That company is called TASCK. We're right now currently doing work, acting as an agency for a lot of creatives, especially people that are doing social impact projects. They're turning their communities around, they're creating value, they're connecting to brands. And so TASCK is TASCK. You guys check us out. That's really important. The second thing is, I was so excited from the first time I saw this email, because I think we're in a moment where people of culture, there are other ways to explain this thing, but I'm just going to say people of culture finally are in a world that will allow them connect without, and you see it in the year of the return. You see it in what's happening with Afrobeats spreading. You see it with like collaborations. You see like, and it's so beautiful. Everyone of culture that's listening, if we can look around at where you've noticed it and just be part of it, because it's tough to remember. It's tough to remember when the world has changed, like positively. It's really hard to see, right? But in my life, I can see like, for me, maybe like the Me Too movement and the positive, like the visceral change, or, after that, but we're living through one where the skin color of who matters in the conversation of global culture is changing. And it's all systems go, all of us, like, and so, especially in hip hop, like I am so privileged to be part of a culture, to be part of I don't even have a word that can capture how I see hip hop. To be part of an idea, a living, breathing idea, born by brothers and sisters of mine who experienced life, such harsh things, and created this art form. And now I can contribute to it. I can add my own story and contribute to it. And to be part of this global meshing of the culture, to be part of this specific subsection of hip hop, I hope that I can show up and give it integrity. So I say that to say, check out MI's music. It will teach you a lot about how Africa has grown up through hip hop, how we see hip hop, how we see, our role in contributing to this living, breathing idea called hip hop. And after that, it was just dope, man. I love hanging out with dope people, and this was a great conversation.
Thank you. No, we definitely appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, Amai.
Yeah.
I should be close to retirement. Couple more years we retiring, but none of you rappers inspiring. None of you pass the requirement. I can retire you then. Who gonna fix the environment? Y'all got me coming back, switch on the siren. Still on my J.O.B. None of these rappers can fire me. I can retire you then.